it doesn't seem like it would be fun because you're sitting there reading these depositions, but when you're reading them, every once in a while there's just this aha moment where you're like, I know how I'm going to defend this person. Like, I know what I'm going to say to make this be okay for them, and it's really cool feeling. And then they send you a check for the aha moment, and you're like, oh, that's really cool.
All right, guys, welcome to the Medical Entrepreneur Podcast. We have a special guest who is the epitome of a medical entrepreneur, Dana Standridge, CRNA. She is not only a CRNA, she is also an expert witness. She also has her own aesthetics practice. And in addition to that, she also raises chickens. Talk about an entrepreneur in all fronts.
Welcome, Dana. We're so glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
So we were chatting earlier and let's just get down to it. What is something in anesthesia that you think everyone should stop doing?
I think the simplest answer is to stop writing a plus sign for end-tidal CO2.
Do you want to talk about how you came to know this?
Oh, unfortunately, I was involved in a lawsuit back in 2017. It was a high-profile case in my area with a surgeon who ended up having about 17 or 18 lawsuits brought against her. And the short story of a very long story is that I was pulled into a lawsuit for a patient who survived but had some type of event in PACU. We're not really exactly sure what happened. But in the course of going through the lawsuit, I came across a couple things that I wasn't aware of. One big thing is that we are required, if we're doing office-based anesthesia, to check the credentials of all of the staff that's in the room with us, according to the ANA, which when I say that, people are like, I have never walked into any setting in medicine and asked to see somebody's credentials. It's just basically, we don't really do it. We assume if we've been credentialed, that everybody else in the room has been credentialed also. So in the course of my case, during my deposition, the plaintiff's attorney let me know that the nurse that I gave report to in PACU was not in fact a nurse. She had gone to nursing school, but she had not actually ever sat for boards and had been practicing as a nurse for years without a license, which is shocking to me. The other thing that came after the lawsuit, which is the end-tidal CO2 part, the Georgia Board of Nursing pursued a consent order against me after I settled my lawsuit. And part of that consent order was that I failed to write a quantitative number, an actual number for end-tidal CO2 via nasal cannula. Which we all know in practice, it's an open system. It's not an accurate number. We usually all write a plus sign. That's what we've learned in our careers and in schooling. And they basically had me sign a consent order that said I was taking responsibility for the adverse outcome of the case because I did not record an actual number for end-tidal CO2.
And Dana, just to kind of quantify that for people that are not in anesthesia, it's actually common practice, and we're all trained essentially to put a positive sign instead of a number whenever you have a system like you described where it's not an accurate measure.
Correct.
And so even though this is common practice everywhere, the state of Georgia decided to essentially force this issue on you and basically make you admit something that everybody does is considered standard of care. To try to show that basically you did something wrong. Is that what happened?
Yes, essentially that's basically what happened. So the original consent order that they brought to me, which took my attorney and I took about, a year and a half to get the consent order whittled down to something that I was comfortable signing. And the original consent order included a lot of different things, but the end-tidal CO2 was part of it. And they also accused me of patient abandonment because I gave report to the PACU nurse who was not a nurse. So they kind of wrapped all these things into one giant thing. And we went back and forth, and I was like, there's no way that I'm going to sign a paper that says I abandoned this patient because I didn't know that the nurse was a nurse. And after I dropped the patient off in PACU, I went to the bathroom. I mean, that's crazy. So yeah, so basically they needed something to stick, and that's what they decided to go with.
So, I mean, basically what they're telling you is that you delivered a perfect anesthetic. The person basically got to recovery safe, sound, her vitals are stable.
Moved herself to the bed.
Moved herself to the other bed after anesthesia. Like that pretty much is like the definition of a good anesthetic, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, some of the other things in the consent order that were really funny is that I failed to acknowledge what anesthesia medications do to a patient. I was like, that they cause sedation. I was like, yeah, I think I did learn that somewhere. So there was a lot of stuff, and you know, in the board's defense, which I don't say this lightly, I think that they felt like they needed to respond to a surgeon in a situation that was definitely not good. So they felt like they had to do something, and in doing so, they continued to pursue something that I think once they got into it, realized it really wasn't what they thought they were pursuing. But then their back was kind of up against the wall because the composite board was taking action against the physician, the medical board. So I think they just felt like they needed to do something. So that's why we got it down to something so essentially benign. I mean, writing a plus sign for end-tidal CO2, we don't think anything about that. I mean, that's pretty much normal. So now I don't do that anymore. I write a plus sign, and then I write a little slash mark, and then I write the number that the end-tidal CO2 is reading, even if it's not compatible with life. And I write a note that says end-tidal CO2 not accurate to kind of cover myself, you know, going forward with this.
So on these charges, these were brought about by members of the Board of Nursing?
Yes.
They come up with the charges?
Yes, they do. They have like a panel, and at the time that this happened, the Board of Nursing did have a CRNA on the panel.
So a CRNA saw this and knew these charges were being...
Yes, yeah, and supported them. Yeah, but
Scary.
Yeah, it is.
Can you tell a little bit more about like how you got involved in this case? Because this is not a surgeon you normally worked with, right?
No, it wasn't. I was actually I had met her previously and had gone by her office to meet her and look at her facility. And I had done probably one or two cases with her before this particular procedure. And she had actually called me maybe a night or two before the procedure. And the anesthesiologist that was supposed to do the case wasn't able to do it. And she basically said, you know, could you come in and do the case with us? And I was working during the day. I already had a full day of pediatric oral surgery in the morning. So I said, yeah, I can come in and do the case, but I'm not going to be able to be there until 2:00 because the patient was a nurse. So it kind of pulled at my heartstrings there, and she was having a procedure done, a plastics case before her upcoming wedding and honeymoon. So, you know, all these things kind of played into my decision to say yes and go to do the case, even though I had not done this particular procedure with her before. I mean, I had done the case before, but not the case with her. So it was kind of walking into a new arena for me as far as working with her. So, so I wasn't even supposed to be there that day.
This was also at her office?
Yes, it was in her office.
Okay, so it's in a facility you weren't familiar with yet, even though that was the case, the state of Georgia wanted you to inspect everyone's license that worked in her office. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Well, that's an ANA requirement.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, no, it's when I tell the story, people are just like befuddled by it because it's all these series of things that I guess all put together. You're like, oh my gosh, like how in the world did they have a nurse in the room and in PACU who wasn't a nurse? Like, it's like mind blowing. And I think that's why there was so much attention on the surgeon, because the surgeon, obviously, this is her facility, and she hired all these people and she credentialed all these people. So there was a lot of, you know, going back and forth about how that had even happened. And I still, to this day, I am befuddled by it too, the fact that, and then that nobody told me about it until my own deposition.
When you say she credentialed her, so does she know she wasn't a nurse?
I think that she knew she was not a nurse. Yeah. I mean, I never heard it out of her mouth, but I mean, how do you fake a nursing license? I mean, I guess you can, but who goes that far? I don't know. People do, I guess. But so a lot of interesting factors there. But yes, I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't super familiar with the surgeon. Obviously, I wasn't super familiar with the staff. And the case ended up going a lot longer than I anticipated. So there were a lot of things that were just not quite right during the case. The patient was good, but there were a lot of things that, looking back on it now, were kind of like, oh, this is a little bit weird, but I mean, this is the way she does these with an anesthesiologist all the time. So, I didn't really think that much about it while it was happening.
So then, did you say once this happened, there were more cases brought against her?
Yes, I think she ended up having about 17 or 18 when it was all said and done. This one, the one that I was involved in, was probably one of the worst ones, because the patient did have some type of event that led to, we did full ACLS and CPR on her. So she had some type of anoxic brain injury at some point during that. So this particular case was kind of high on the radar of, in the public.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, having gone through that, like, maybe just the toll that took on you? Because, I mean, it sounds, to someone that listens to the story, it sounds, like 15 minutes of someone talking, but you lived that for how many years?
So that case happened in 2000, I guess it was 2016. And then the lawsuit was brought in 2017. No, beginning of 2017, and we settled in November of 2017. And then by August of 2018 is when the Board of Nursing started their investigation against me. So there was a lot of time there, about a year, where we did the trial, which ended up not going to trial, but we did the entire case, which means depositions, reading other people's depositions against you, going to your own deposition, reading depositions of people who are defending you, a lot of just every day, what is going to be in the mail next for me to read, and what am I going to have to face today that has to do with this case. And that was fairly traumatic, but the Board of Nursing incident was really kind of the worst part for me, just because that process took a really long time, like longer than I anticipated it taking, because not only did the Georgia Board of Nursing pursue a consent order, but because we're in a compact state, I also had not active licenses, but I also had a nursing license in the state of Alabama and a CRNA license in the state of Florida. And both of those states also tried to take consent orders out against me as part of the compact state laws. So totally legal and completely within their jurisdiction to do that. So once the Georgia Board of Nursing, we did about a year of going back and forth with the Board of Nursing, trying to get that all whittled down to the end title CO2, basically. And then as soon as I signed that paperwork, within a month, the Alabama Board of Nursing and the Florida Board of Nursing contacted me that they were also investigating and pursuing consent orders against my licenses, which were not active or valid licenses. The state of Alabama wanted me to pay to reinstate my license so that they could take a consent order out against it. I was like, you want me to do what now? They're like, yeah, you're going to have to pay to reinstate it, and then you're going to have to pay the fine, and then you're going to have to do the 2 years consent order, and then you can let your license expire again. So that whole process, to me, that kind of, when the Alabama Board of Nursing called and said, we're starting an investigation against you, is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for me. That was the day that I called my husband on the way home from work, and I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing anesthesia anymore. We're going to have to figure out another way to send the kids to college and to pay the mortgage, because this is the last straw. Like, I can't emotionally handle this anymore. And, you guys know Michael, so he was like, okay, well, that's ridiculous, because you can't do that. So why don't you get a good cry out on the way home, and we'll talk reasonably when you get home. So by the time I got home, obviously I realized that wasn't going to be the case. But that was probably the hardest. I mean, I just finished the Georgia consent order. Was it October of last year? Somewhere in there, yeah. So if you think about it, 2017 to 2021, essentially, is how long that process lasted for me, between the case and then the Georgia Board of Nursing and the Alabama Board of Nursing and the Florida Board of Nursing. So all of that right now is finished. Knock on wood, everything is done, and I've moved on to the next phase, which is the cool part of this. If there is a cool part.
A question I want to ask too, where you talked about, you said it was really hard for you to sign that with the consent order for Georgia. I know you in real life, outside the podcast. And I know you to be like probably one of the kindest, most caring individuals that I've ever met, with like highest ethical standards. What did it feel like to you to basically sign something that you were being falsely accused of?
Oh, well, that was a big part of that consent order. Is I essentially demanded that there was a paragraph put into the consent order that essentially says, I am not signing this. By signing this, I am not admitting to any fault. There's a whole paragraph that basically says I didn't do anything wrong. I don't feel like I was the cause of this patient's injury. And I'm signing this just says I want to move on with my life. It in no way means that I did anything wrong. Which was really, really important to me. And that was kind of the paragraph that we worked on for a long time, getting the state of Georgia, the board, to kind of agree to because that's not part of a normal consent order, to let them, I wasn't going to sign anything until they agreed to put that in there. So I felt better about signing the consent order once that was in there, because it felt like I was finishing that chapter, but I was finishing it on my terms.
Able to say, speak your piece.
Yeah,
maybe.
Definitely.
Well, that's a very traumatic thing, and to have to go through that for 4 years is just, it's got to take a huge emotional toll.
Oh, definitely.
During that time, do you feel like you made a transition into something new?
During that time was when I started doing aesthetics, my other side hustle, which was my best friend was just like, I pay a lot of money to get Botox done, and I feel like you could do just as good of a job as the place that's doing it. So, why don't you just look into doing this? And once I started exploring, I was like, oh, this is really fun and a really enjoyable kind of side thing for me to do. So that came out of it in that time period. And then after my case settled, but before the Board of Nursing started all of their actions against me, my attorney, Chip, came to me and basically said, we really feel strongly that you would be a really good person to have on our team as an expert witness to come in and defend other CRNAs. And at the time, I was like, I don't want anything else to do with anything that has to do with anesthesia and the law. Like, I'm kind of done at this point with all of that. And he said, I understand, that you feel that way, but I think that you would be an asset. You could help us defend other CRNAs who find themselves in the position that you were in. So, and that is what started my side job as an expert witness, which is also fabulous in an opposite direction from aesthetics, because it's a completely different field and realm of anesthesia that has also been very enjoyable and very fulfilling for me.
What did he have to say that finally convinced you to give it a try? Because you say, you were kind of like done with the system. And what was the one thing that you'd like, okay, maybe I'll give this a try? At
that time, when he approached me, I thought I was finished kind of with everything that happened. The case had settled, and it was kind of like I took this big sigh of relief, and Chip and I said goodbye, and we kind of parted ways, and that was the end of it. And then when the Board of Nursing issue started, I had to call him back and say, okay, I've got this letter in the mail. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with it. And so our relationship kind of started again. And in that process is when he basically said, you know, I know that you're at your lowest right now. I know that you feel like you're at rock bottom. But I see something in you that I've seen in you from the beginning that I think you can help other people. I mean, and that's essentially what it came down to, is he's like, you have the opportunity to help somebody else in the same situation that you were in. And just like those people, other people that were involved in your case that came to your defense, you can do that for somebody else. And that kind of was the piece that convinced me that it was, and then also he said, you know, but you're not going to be the one who's in a case. Like, you're going to be involved in a case, but a totally different direction. Those feelings are going to be different, and the way it's going to be approached and everything. So once all that was kind of laid out, I said, okay, well, I'll give it a try, and we'll see how it goes. So I did one case, and after one case, I was hooked. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. You learn so much stuff that you don't learn in school, and the way law works. I mean, basically, we have no concept of how the legal system works until you dive into it. And it's fascinating information.
And then you got to make your invoice and you're like, okay, I'll keep on.
Yes. So that was the other thing. When I started, I pretty much had no idea what I was doing. Like, he would basically hold my hand and walk me through everything. And I remember he didn't specifically do it, but somebody in his office kind of walked me through how to do my first invoice. And I was like, okay, so, you know, you've got to type in a review of deposition of Dr. Smith. And it took me an hour and 25 minutes, and at $300 an hour. And then once you start adding it up, you're like, okay, I read this deposition and this deposition and these medical records in this deposition. And I mean, I've done it all from home in my pajamas when the kids are, you know, swimming in the pool or off at school or whatever. And I've just submitted a bill for like $3,000. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I can see another reason why I might want to keep doing this.
So not only were you able to help people, you also got paid well for it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's fun. It doesn't seem like it would be fun because you're sitting there reading these depositions, but when you're reading them, every once in a while, there's just this aha moment where you're like, I know how I'm going to defend this person. Like, I know what I'm going to say to make this be okay for them. And it's really cool feeling. And then they send you a check for the aha moment, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. So.
Well, I think Chip was right in what he said about how you can help a lot of people, because now at this point, you know, you've told your story on a couple of our teaching webinars at Nashville event. You told it live. And some of the things I've seen come back from that, and even the course, was that people say, Dana, like, thank you so much for sharing your story and putting this out there, because this is hard for us all to talk about. But I went through a lawsuit, and thank you for validating the feelings that I felt, and like, it helped me navigate it. So he was certainly on the right course when he told you that you'll help a lot of people. And just the fact that you've become an expert witness, but now like sharing your story of what happened to you. But then, you know, as you started sharing your story more, there was more people who said, oh, I think I'd be interested in doing the expert witness work, which came to us making the course together. And it, again, which has been more good feedback, because they're like, oh, I've always wanted to do this. I didn't know how to get started. Or they had maybe the same feelings that you did, like, I'm not qualified, or I don't know where to start. And by you just outlining the steps in the course has made a lot of other CRNAs have the opportunity of doing the expert witness work as well. How does that feel to you to realize now that you went from being a CRNA who at one point was considering giving up, not being a CRNA anymore, questioning everything, to now you've influenced a lot of other CRNAs to maybe pursue a side hustle that they never thought about, of doing expert witness work? I would say you're, you know, kind of a CRNA influencer maybe now, because a lot of people really look up to you because they've heard your story and they know how strong you are. I guess maybe you look back, it's like, wow, if I would have given up, like, you know, all this wouldn't have happened. So What does it feel like now that you've had an impact on a lot of people by just sharing your story?
You know, you have asked me that question in different ways at different times in this process. And it makes me feel, I don't know, because in all the times that you've asked me this, I've never given the same answer because I don't really know. All I know is that people say, oh my gosh, I can't believe how strong you were. And I just look at it and say, I was just facing what was coming at me. And I was just, putting one step in front of the other. And I don't feel like I did anything superhero worthy. Like I really just kept moving forward in my life the best that I could. But that point where it shifted from I'm surviving to I'm thriving is like magical. I don't even know. It's like there's not a human word to describe like how it feels. Like one day you're drowning and the next day somebody is calling you and saying, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for the impact that you've had on my life. Thank you so much for all that you're doing. And it's like, how did this happen? Like, how did it go from so dark to so light, but not overnight? So it seems like it was overnight, but it was over a course of years, that I've gotten to the place where I feel comfortable talking about it. I don't feel ashamed. I feel like I want to help other people who are going through something similar. And I've talked to a lot of CRNAs who are facing consent orders, who are facing lawsuits. And I've just tried to be a friend and be a support system to them. And it was so much fun making the course with you and with Chip, my attorney. He dove right in, which was so cool. Like he's passionate about this subject too. He's passionate about people defending other people within their scope of practice and, helping other people who are going through stuff like this. So if you take the course, you'll see he just jumps in, and he's such a serious guy, but he was just like so gung ho. Like every time he got on, he was like, this is what he was really cool. But I don't know. What was the original question? How does it make me feel? All those things. It makes me feel all those things. I don't know. It's hard to pinpoint one exact feeling.
And then I was going to say you've had a massive impact. And like one of the things I've learned from you was just that, after hearing your case, I just felt that you were really treated unfairly because you did everything right and you did everything that would be considered standard by anyone who does anesthesia. And yet the system kind of came after you because the system needed to justify itself.
Correct. And I think that's how the legal system works in all areas of law. I mean, that's one thing that's really sad is that it does have to justify itself. And I unfortunately was a victim to that, but I also overcame that, which I think is the cooler part of the story for me.
For sure. And I was just going to say, like, since working, with the course and like also, being connected to the network, I've done a lot of cases myself for other doctors. And I can tell you there's the same thing happens to them too, where basically they've been like, in some cases I've seen doctors basically be harassed because they wrote medications for patients that were too expensive based on what the insurance wanted to pay. And now the insurance has filed a board complaint against the doctor because the insurance didn't want to pay for the medication, not because the medication was bad. It didn't help the patient was happy with it, but like just stuff like that. And I feel like anybody who follows your pathway, like you become a kind of like a protector or a guardian of other medical professionals who can get, sideswiped by these things that are unexpected,
Yeah. And I think a big part of bringing light to it and sharing my story is to help people not be blindsided by things, to help people see like these things happen every day to normal people all the time. I mean, normal practitioners who are just going about their day-to-day business and doing everything that they think is the right thing to do. And bad things still happen. I mean, cases go poorly and it has nothing to do with your ability as a provider. Just sometimes bad things happen. So I think, or I hope that sharing my story and what happened encourages people who find themselves in the same situation, but also prepares people for what could happen.
prepares people, but also just by you now, the fact that you have made the course and you maybe kind of mentored other people into getting the expert witness work, because more than ever, we see with what happened to you and just the cases he explained, like we need good expert witnesses out there to defend, our brothers and sisters in medicine whenever something like this happens, because it is unfortunate how often it does happen. So that's what I say. We can't really get enough good CRNA expert witnesses out there. Even in your case, I was going to ask you, I know you said there was a CRNA on the nursing board. Did an expert witness review the consent order, or do you not have an opportunity for an expert witness to review the consent order?
So the way consent orders work in the state of Georgia, you really don't get a chance to have anybody unless you decide that you're not going to sign the consent order, and then you actually go to a trial. And that trial is basically tried in front of one judge, no jury, just one judge. And basically it's the Board of Nursing versus you. And you go in with all of your information, and it's like a trial in front of this judge. And the reason that I chose not to go that route is if you have whittled down your consent order to let's just say end-tidal CO2, and you didn't write a number for end-tidal CO2, you wrote a plus sign. Well, any person who sees that, who's in medicine or anesthesia like we are, would laugh at that. They're like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe that this is a real consent order. So when we got it down to that, if I had chosen to continue down the route of going before a judge and it basically being me versus the Board of Nursing, every single thing in the original consent order comes back into play. So not only am I defending the end-tidal CO2, but I'm defending patient abandonment, and I'm defending, I don't even remember all the things that were, there was, I don't know, probably 10 different things that were in the consent order. So I had gotten them all the way down to that one thing. And my attorney was like, we can go in front of this judge who's not a medical judge. He's just a judge, and he's going to look at all these things, and you're going to have to fight all over again and start over. And I was like, I'm not interested in that. Let's just sign this consent order. So that to me is also mind-boggling, that it can come down to you versus an entire board and one judge.
Yeah.
And then the same judge who probably sees the attorney for the board like every month and maybe play golf with them,
Exactly.
That doesn't sound very fair. That doesn't sound very fair.
Exactly. So when Chip and I talked about it, he was just like, I personally think that you should feel confident in what we've gotten the consent order down to, and you shouldn't be ashamed of what that consent order says. And I think we should sign it and be done with it. So, and he, Chip became like a family member to me. I spent 4 years doing a lot of soul searching with him. So when he said, I think we should just do it this way, I agreed that was the best way to go. So.
And then could you maybe talk about, because, we get tons of positive feedback on your course. And for those that don't know, basically Dana has made a beautiful course with Chip. And basically it is essentially the kind of like all the lessons you learned during that period, right? And then also connects them to a network of attorneys that need basically what are considered like medical expert witnesses, right?
Yeah. So we put together a course that it talks about a lot of different legal elements of practice that a lot of us don't learn in school. And those things are, defensive charting. And we get some courses on that, but I think as we continue in our practice, we become less vigilant about the way we chart. It's just, we start assuming things that we necessarily shouldn't assume that somebody else would understand or recognize. So we talk about, defensive charting, and we talk about compact state laws and what that means for CRNAs and RNs. We talk about consent orders and what a consent order is, and how you can read a consent order, and what the terms of a consent order are, what they mean, public consent order versus private consent order. And then the whole other half of the program is basically the ins and outs of being an expert witness. So what you need to know, how to read a deposition, how to defend your opinion, how to go to a deposition, how to go to trial, how to bill, just kind of an all-encompassing. And then once you've taken the course, you get into a network basically of attorneys that are all looking for expert witnesses. And they kind of like to freshen up the pool every once in a while and get a new face in there. And if you do well, then they'll, Chip's firm, for instance, they probably have 15 different locations across the country, probably even more than that at this point, 15 to 20. So, I have a case right now in Nashville, Tennessee, because Chip, somebody in his firm called and said, hey, we have a case that we need a CRNA expert witness. Do you have somebody that you could recommend? And Chip gave him my information, and now I'm working on that case. The other element that is cool with the course is that if there's a case that I can't do, I go to the database of the people who've taken the course, and I find somebody in the vicinity of that case and somebody who has, I don't do OB cases because I haven't done OB since anesthesia school. So I automatically pass on those because I'm not an expert in OB anesthesia. So I find somebody on the list who is an expert in OB anesthesia and who has taken the course, and then I pass that name on to whoever needs it for their case.
So to be an expert witness, you need experience in the field of where the case is related in the last 5 years?
Yes, it's sometime in the last 5 years. And essentially being an expert just means that you do it on a regular basis. You don't have to have published any articles, and you don't have to have done any research studies or anything like that. Basically, you just have to be in the practice of that particular procedure and do it on a regular basis within 5 years of the date of the incident. So that gets a little bit confusing because sometimes cases don't pull in expert witnesses until 7 years after the date of the case. So it's within 5 years before the date of the case or after the date of the case, or concomitantly with the date of the actual event.
Okay, so it gives a little leeway.
Yeah, so you got some wiggle room on either side. So like a couple of years ago, I did a case with a pain management case. And today I probably wouldn't take that case because I'm outside of a 5-year window of actually having done those cases on a regular basis, doing anesthesia for those cases on a regular basis. So some of those cases I pass on just because, like, one of them was a central line. Well, I was never good at central lines to begin with, and I certainly haven't done one since anesthesia school. So I passed that case on to somebody else.
Awesome. And then what would you say about people that are maybe interested in maybe becoming an expert witness? Like what's it like? Can you describe more of that?
Well, I mean, it's super cool to start with. It's actually, it's great for me because it gives me the opportunity a lot of days to not put on makeup and not do my hair and not put on clothes. I can sit in my pajamas and read and put in a load of laundry and read some more and make dinner for the kids and read some more. It's a job that it's an opportunity with a lot of flexibility because another part of it is that the legal system is really slow. So you can read, 5 depositions in a week that they send you all at one time, and then nothing else happens with that case, for 3 or 4 months. And then they send you a whole slew of stuff to read, and there's no time pressure. They say, whenever you get these read, just send us an invoice and let us know your opinion. So it kind of gives you a little bit of flexibility. So when I have weeks that I have less going on, anesthesia or aesthetics, then I put a lot of time into doing my legal stuff. And it's just cool because, you call and say, well, this is how I see things happen, and this is what I think they did right. And you also have to say, this is what I think we're going to have a hard time defending. This is something that might be difficult because they didn't write down a train of for however many 15-minute increments. And some people are like, well, that's the standard of care to write it every 15 minutes. And other people are like, no, we don't necessarily do that. If we're not redosing a paralytic, we don't necessarily rewrite, train of 4 every time. So the fascinating thing is that, and what I say to Chip all the time, law is very, very black and white, and anesthesia is very gray. And so it's this line where we meet in the middle about attorneys like everything to be, well, this package insert says the dose should be given, and it's like, well, in anesthesia, we don't necessarily do it that way. It's based on patient's response and, the provider's experience. So you get to kind of intervene and say, well, this is the black and white answer, but this is the art of anesthesia. And you're kind of the middle person. You're the middle ground of trying to defend and explain why things were done a certain way. And you get to defend somebody and say, I can see why they did this, and this is what I probably would have done too.
Again, while we need good expert witnesses, to defend the gray.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that before, that you've seen cases where they're questioning because the anesthesia provider gave medicine that wasn't exactly the way the package insert said to do that, which, as providers, we know we give things off label or to titration every day.
Yeah.
But again, these are some of the cases you're seeing now, is that the attorneys, the defense is going after the provider for not following package insert on dosing.
Yes. I have a case right now that is the depositions that I've read, particularly the CRNA, like half of the deposition was the attorney has a propofol package insert, and was saying, and I don't know if you've read a propofol package insert, but they're like it's like 30 pages long, and it's insane. I mean, the way that they say you should dose propofol is nothing like we do in real life on a regular basis. But they have to cover their butts too. So they put these package inserts in. Have you ever gotten a bottle of propofol that has a package insert still attached to it? No. I mean, so I spent a lot of time researching and reading the insert from a propofol because I hadn't done that before, because that's not the way we practice. But that's half of the deposition was him saying, but according to this package insert, you gave this propofol too quickly, or you gave too much of this propofol in this time period. And I haven't gotten to do my deposition yet, so I'm still in the beginning phases of that case. So that one is going to be interesting to see how that one ends up. And the other thing that is really, I think, interesting about being an expert witness and the way the legal system works, a lot of times people will look at my case and what I went through and the fact that I settled as a loss. But it's not, and that's not the way it works when you're talking about a legal case. Settling and not having to go to trial and not having to extend into that period of a person's life is huge. So I settled, but I consider that a win. So when you're doing these cases, sometimes I would say the majority of the time, I feel like when we finish, even if a case is settled, that we've won, because this section of a person's life, the practitioner's life, is over. They don't have to go through the daily hurt and struggle of what's going to be in my mailbox today for this case, and what's going to happen next, and all the uncertainty kind of goes away. So a lot of people are like, oh, well, you settled, so you lost. And I was like, yeah, but I mean, it's a win. We settled for $300,000. Well, that's a pretty good deal. I mean, I just had a case that settled, and they settled for $300,000, and I was like, that's brilliant. That's the best news ever, because they didn't have to do the full trial and all the other stuff that goes with it.
Kind of like buying back your time in your life.
Yeah, definitely.
One thing I've learned just from taking your course, and then also just kind of following your footsteps, was that I felt like there's a lot of medical practitioners that can get into trouble for things that we're unaware of, and there's nobody there that even understands what's going on, let alone is an advocate for them. Like the legal system doesn't understand, doesn't care to understand, doesn't care to learn. Many times the opposing attorneys or boards or whatever, they just like what happened in your case, they have an agenda, and it's like, you're going to fit in their agenda. It doesn't matter if it's right, wrong, or indifferent. And so by being that expert witness, you're kind of like the knight in shining armor that comes to save them because
there's somebody on their side, somebody who's speaking up for them, and somebody who's saying, I see what you did and I understand why you did it, and I'm here to hold your hand and to lift you up and help you.
Are there any characteristics that you think make a really good expert witness?
Being able to read, that's really important. But that's it. I mean, I think knowing, being able to, you have to be able to do some research and be able to back up. You can't always just say, this is right because it's my opinion. Sometimes you have to do some research and be able to back up why you feel a certain way. And you have to be able to present your thoughts and opinions in an organized fashion, which requires preparation. You have to be able to, prepare your thoughts and prepare what you want to say. And but I think that's about it. And being, active in the field that you're trying to defend.
I think a lot of us, when we start something new, we think, will I be good enough? Am I qualified? Kind of like even the feeling probably you had when Chip, asked you, which I understand that you had a reason to want to get as far away from the legal system as you could. But what do you, for anyone that's kind of feeling that way, like, I don't think, I'm qualified. What's a little nudge maybe you would give them, just like Chip gave you, of how, you can help a lot of people?
I mean, let's just put it in anesthesia terms. I mean, me personally, I was pretty sure that I was not going to be able to get through anesthesia school, right? I mean, it's probably one of the hardest things that we've ever faced.
For sure.
Not just getting into school, but getting through it and finishing it and passing your boards and all those things that at one time you think, gosh, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. And then you do. So I think the same thing, it applies to every aspect in your life. You don't know you can't do it if you don't try, right? I mean, you're always going to fail if you never try.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's it, and that's everything in life, not just being an expert witness, not just anesthesia school. I mean, if you don't try to ride a bike, you're never going to learn.
And then just for someone who's listening to this and they're thinking, oh man, I'm kind of interested in the expert witness. What could you tell them a little bit about you mentioned a little bit about kind of the lifestyle, so they know as long as they know how to read, they feel confident in their opinions, but then can you talk a bit more about what money could be made as an expert witness?
Yeah. So like I was alluding to before, I think the legal system and being an expert witness is an ebb and flow for sure. So I think you'll find that most expert witnesses do not, make all of their income or their living from being an expert witness. It's definitely a side thing. One, because you have to stay within the field that you're actually being an expert witness in. So I have to continue to practice anesthesia. So I'm not, it's not, this isn't just, I'm going to give up anesthesia and move into this other field, because you have to stay practicing. And sometimes for me, COVID, and I know this is, we can say universally to pretty much everybody during COVID, but the legal system also completely shut down during COVID. So there was no cases were being tried. There were no depositions being done. There were no trials, and the actual caseload went down. The actual cases that were being, surgical cases and anesthesia cases that were being performed actually went down too, because we weren't doing elective cases for a long time. So we're kind of in this upswing right now. So I probably went for about a year when I only had one or two active cases, and they were just moving really, really slowly. So I wasn't making a ton of money off of that. But then in the last probably 4 months, all of those cases have upticked and are back in either in deposition phase or in trial phase. And I've gotten 3 new cases in the last 3 months. So it's one of those, it's one of those things where sometimes in a month I can bring in $10,000, and in the next month, 300. So there's no, it can't be your only source of income. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, because it's not super consistent. And that's just the nature of the legal system. I mean, that's the way it works.
So it sounds like it's a perfect side hustle then, definitely not like a full-time thing.
It's definitely not a full-time thing. And, it's almost, there are a lot of plaintiffs' attorneys that I have done depositions with that it's almost frowned upon for it to be your main source of income. They really want it to be something that is you're not making all of your money off of going into a courtroom and defending or testifying. They really want it to be a certain percentage, under a certain percentage of your income. So it's definitely in the side hustle, section of income.
So for the time that you do work, would you say hourly, how the rate compares to your CRNA work?
Yeah. So consistently, we're on an upswing too in what CRNAs are being paid these days. But when I started as an expert witness in my area, Atlanta is notoriously low paying. So when I started as an expert witness, I believe I was making about $100 to $110 an hour as a CRNA. And my first expert witness case, it was $300 an hour to read depositions and to review medical records. When you go to a deposition, it's $1,500 for 4 hours. And then I think I do about $400 an hour for each hour over 4 hours. And then a live trial is $5,000 a day. And when I say day, that's really like 2 hours of your time. You take the whole day off, but you don't testify for 8 hours. You probably testify for like an hour. So we're talking about an hour to get there, maybe sit around for a little while. You do the trial and you're questioning for an hour, and then you're done. So that's $5,000 for 4 hours of work.
So just to recap that, basically you get paid $110 an hour to basically have someone's life in your hands,
Yeah.
where you've basically given them essentially what is, taken away their ability to have consciousness, taken away their ability to even, manage a lot of their own organ systems, and you're taking all that responsibility. Or you could get $300 an hour to sit at home in your pajamas and read legal documents.
Yes, pretty much. I mean, when you can say it that way and you compare it, it's like, this is crazy. Like, what? Why?
Yeah, even the risk, so much.
What's the point? But again, you have to keep doing the one part of it in order to do the second part of it. So
sure.
Yeah. And there's some days that I go to work, and now the rate in Atlanta is better now, so I'm making a little bit more as a CRNA, just because as things have turned around from COVID, that's kind of been the nature of how things are going these days. But I can work all day, 8 hours, and then come home and read 2 depositions in 3 hours and make the same amount of money. So,
wow.
If you put it in that perspective, you're like, yeah, I mean, this is really the better gig. So
it's a perfect add-on.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure.
I was going to say, it's funny when you think of it in that perspective, because I thought about that at one of the surgery centers. It's like, you're looking at the patient, and it's like, wow, somebody thought that, your life today and me keeping you safe through the surgery was worth $150.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It's I don't know. That's a whole other conversation about how screwed up our medical system is.
For sure.
Medical and legal, they kind of go hand in hand with just not quite what you would think they should be.
We see a ton of positive reviews from your students, and then could you maybe share some of the stories of your students that have worked with you?
Yeah, I actually was just talking to someone who took the course kind of early on in the beginning, and she is on her second case, and it's going really, really well. And I know that I have referred, when I was referring back to the cases that I can't take, and I find somebody else to do them. I think there's probably 4 who currently have cases that are in different phases. One of them I just handed off to somebody, and I talked to her about 2 weeks ago, and she had just started reviewing the depositions and kind of figuring out how she was going to bill and doing the invoice and going back over the course and stuff. So how long has the course been out? A little over a year?
A little over a year.
A little over a year. So
a year and a month, I think.
Yeah. So right now, I think of people who've taken, and obviously, I think there are a lot of people who have taken the course that I don't know about legal work that they've gotten. This is just the ones that have reached out to me. I think there's six active people right now who've taken the course who have gotten cases and are actively working on them. Which doesn't seem like a huge amount, except for that's only the ones that I know about. So there could be a lot of others that, that are in that pool that have been asked to do cases that I don't even know about.
Again, it goes back to how, you've helped a lot of people, kind of like what you call the hourglass effect. It's like you made this course that taught all these people how to do this thing. So now they can go out and defend and help other people in a time of need just because you were willing to share your story and influence a lot of people.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Is there any examples of any students that you had that basically have been able to supplement their income or maybe buy something they couldn't buy before because they were able to be an expert witness?
I know that Jenny, who's one of my friends who is also doing a case with CHIP right now, and then because she's doing a case with CHIP, she's sending out her resume to other attorneys in her area that are not associated with CHIP's firm. But basically on her cover letter, it just says, I've taken this course and I'm actively involved in a case with Hall Boo Smith, which is CHIP's firm. And that's pretty much all. She's like, should I put anything else on the cover letter? And I'm like, no, that's pretty much all you have to put. I'm a CRNA. I have a expert witness certification course, and I've already done a case with this law firm. So that was cool to talk to her because she was really excited about, getting her stuff out there, and the first case was going really well and she was really excited about it. So, I don't know of anything specifically. I know for me personally, it's given me the opportunity to spend more time doing aesthetics because I can spend less time doing anesthesia. So it's given me an opportunity to supplement my income enough that I'm still doing anesthesia, but I'm not doing anesthesia 5 days a week, 12 hours a day. I'm doing it, all of three of them in conjunction with each other. And I have a lot more free time. I can do my own schedule in a more productive way for me. And I get to do more aesthetics because the expert witness side of it helps kind of fund that a little bit. And so I can kind of make it all work and still pay the bills, which is pretty much the point of life, it seems like.
On the way you described it earlier too, it sounds kind of like the perfect mom job of maybe a CRNA who kind of wants to cut down a little bit in the OR, but spend more time with your kids. As you said, it's like kids can be swimming in the pool, you're doing work, go through a load of laundry or drop your kids off at sports, come back, work some more. So I can see how it could be a real blessing to some people if maybe, like, say you're wanting to come off call or, go down 1 day per week in the OR, and then you have another income to supplement as well.
Yeah, and the other aspect about it, which is really cool, is it's portable.
Exactly.
Besides, unless you have to be somewhere in a deposition or you're going to trial, the majority of expert witness work is done from anywhere you want to do it. So I think year before last for spring break, we went down to the beach for a week, and when the kids were out, I took my laptop, and while we were at the beach, I just opened up my laptop and read a deposition. So I'm sitting there making money on vacation. My kids are loving life because they're swimming in the ocean. I'm loving life because I'm sitting under the umbrella making money, and and I'm on the beach. So that's another really cool thing about the expert witness stuff is the portability of it. Unless you're doing sitting in a deposition or going to trial, everything else, all the preparation stuff, all the reading of depositions, all the medical records can be done from anywhere you want, because you can get the files on your computer. You can have a hard copy mailed to you, and you can take it with you and read it. You can do it any way you want it. So that's also been really nice. I don't have to sit in my pajamas at home. I can go to the beach and read a deposition.
You truly live the laptop life.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, Dana, this has been awesome. It's always great. Every time, I appreciate you sharing your story and being so open about everything that happened to you. And as we've talked about, you've helped a lot of people. If people want to connect with you, do you want to tell them how they can find the course? Or if they're in Snellville, Georgia and want to get some aesthetic treatments, tell them where they can find you too?
Yeah, sure. So the course is, you can find information at www.crnaexpertwitness.com. And that'll take you to the Painless site, which will give you all the information about taking the course and all the different elements that are within the course. And if you are in Snellville, Georgia, and you want to get some aesthetics, my aesthetics company is Blurred Lines Aesthetics, and you can look us up on Facebook or Instagram. I'm working on my website, so that's kind of fun. I haven't done that before. So I'll have a website up soon for that. So
nice.
Awesome. I just wanted to ask one more question about how important it is to be connected to the right kind of attorneys, because it seems like with these kind of medical cases that, most attorneys are not medical attorneys, and then it seems like they're almost like a clique to themselves. Could you maybe talk about the network and like how important it is to be connected to them if you're going to be an expert witness? I
think, for me, if you are named in a medical malpractice case, most of the time, so my medical malpractice carrier is MedPro. So within MedPro, they have a select group of attorneys that they use. CHIP, I just happen to be assigned an attorney who does a lot of anesthesia medical malpractice. Not all of the malpractice attorneys, defense or otherwise, do anesthesia specifically. So for me, I kind of already am in a network that has all of that. But within any law firm, if they do medical defense work, they will have a section that is anesthesia related. So it's kind of, I don't know that there's a specific network that you can say, these attorneys do anesthesia malpractice, but I'm within every firm, they do have a department that specializes in that. So CHIPS just happens to be like a really good one who's been doing anesthesia medical malpractice for like 25 years or something. But even I'm working on a case right now where the defense attorney is new to anesthesia malpractice. So we're learning a lot together. I'm kind of like helping her learn the ins and outs of anesthesia and how that's, because OB is very different from anesthesia. So if you have, practice in OB defense doesn't necessarily mean anything for anesthesia defense. So I think you get into a network by practicing anesthesia. I mean, you're kind of automatically, it puts you in that network. All
right. Well, I guess that ends our podcast for today. Thank you so much for joining us on The Medical Entrepreneur. And thank you so much, Dana Standridge, for giving you your valuable time and telling us your story and helping so many people become those, white knights and help our brothers and sisters in medicine be defended from, some of the perhaps more corrupt elements of the government, et cetera,
Yes, absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure being here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.